Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome back to the Poem of the Day for today, Wednesday, September 24th, 2025. I'm going to have to keep it kind of short again today because it's a little bit later in the evening and I have not cooked dinner yet, but nonetheless, I wanted to make sure to get a poem in with a few thoughts near the end. And I think this is a perfect one to just give a few thoughts near the end because it is rather beguiling and experimental in its form and structure. So this is the next poem that's coming from Geography 3 by Elizabeth Bishop that we've been reading from throughout this week. And the poem is called 12 O'Clock News. And I want to just show you as best I can here that there are stanzas here sort of written in prose, and then off to the side there's an italicized word. So as I read the poem, I'll leave a pause in between the stanzas of what appear to be prose, but I'll begin by reading the italicized word off to the side, almost as though it's the title of the stanza / paragraph, even though I don't think it's intended to be that way. It's intended to be side by side, but it's kind of impossible to read that way. So, again, this is 12 O'Clock News by Elizabeth Bishop, 1977. Gooseneck Lamp. As you know, tonight is the night of the full moon, half the world over, but here the moon seems to hang motionless in the sky. It gives very little light. It could be dead. Visibility is poor, nevertheless we shall try to give you some idea of the lay of the land and the present situation. Typewriter. The escarpment that rises abruptly from the central plains is in a heavy shadow, but the elaborate terracing of its southern glacis gleams faintly in the dim light like fish scales. What endless labor those small, peculiarly shaped terraces represent, and yet on them the welfare of this tiny principality depends. Pile of M's. A slight landslide occurred in the northwest about an hour ago. The exposed soil appears to be of poor quality, almost white, calcareous and shaly. There are believed to have been no casualties. Typed sheet. Almost due north, our aerial reconnaissance reports the discovery of a large rectangular field, hitherto known to us, obviously man-made. It is dark speckled. An airstrip? A cemetery? Envelopes. In this small backward country, one of the most backward left in the world today, communications are crude and industrialization and its products almost non-existent. Strange to say, however, signboards are on a truly gigantic scale. Ink bottle. We have also received reports of a mysterious, oddly shaped black structure at an undisclosed distance to the east. Its presence was revealed only because its highly polished surface catches such feeble moonlight as prevails. The natural resources of the country being far from completely known to us, there is the possibility that this may be or may contain some powerful and terrifying secret weapon. On the other hand, given what we do know, or have learned from our anthropologists and sociologists about this people, it may well be nothing more than a numen, or a great altar recently erected to one of their gods, to which, in the present historical state of superstition and helplessness, they attribute magical powers, and may even regard as a savior, one last hope of rescue from their grave difficulties. Typewriter eraser. At last, one of the elusive natives has been spotted. He appears to have been a unicyclist courier who may have met his end by falling from the height of the escarpment because of the deceptive illumination. Alive, he would have been small, but undoubtedly proud and erect, with the thick, bristling black hair typical of the indigenes. Ashtray. From our superior vantage point, we can clearly see into a sort of dugout, possibly a shell crater, a nest of soldiers. They lie heaped together, wearing the camouflage, battle dress, intended for winter warfare. They are in hideously contorted positions, all dead. We can make out at least 8 bodies. These uniforms were designed to be used in guerrilla warfare on the country's one snow-covered mountain peak. The fact that these soldiers are wearing them here on the plain gives further proof, if proof were necessary, either of the childishness and hopeless impracticality of this inscrutable people, our opponents, or of the sad corruption of their leaders. Okay. So I attempted, as I was reading, to give a sense of the breaks with the kind of italic titling off to the side, and then each of the subsequent, 8 stanzas. I put on a slight affectation of a newscaster there because this is titled 12 o'clock news, and the way that the prose sections are written are in a very kind of polished, professional, but also objective, descriptive, and really kind of patronizing way as the poem continues. I mean, it begins with the "as you all know," which is the first line, and yet it continues to describe in ways that are abstract or perhaps opaque, the things that are kind of roundabout. What is uncertain to the speaker or the reporter. So there would be a description of a large rectangular field, the discovery hitherto unknown. Is it an airstrip? Is it a cemetery? Which seem like two very strange things, but one of them represents air travel, a technological progress, a sign of technological progress, and the other is something much more, I think, common to cultures, which is a sacred site of mourning and burying the dead. As the newscaster proceeds throughout, there's the discussion, of course, of this thing which is foreign, which initially they perceive to possibly be a threat. And once it's rendered not a threat because it's not sophisticated enough, the people that they're seeing here, then they immediately take on this kind of what I'm going to call like a National Geographic or kind of BBC descriptive tone that keeps a distance to it, referring to them as superstitious, helpless, right? Grave difficulties, calling for a savior. I'm reminded a lot in this poem of the last chapter of Brave New World, when the reporters are going to see John, the savage on the island, and are, fetishizing or objectifying in a like exoticized way the way that he lives his life that's so different from theirs, almost as though they're glimpsing him at a zoo or they're glimpsing him through glass. Even though he's a human being like them, they treat him as though he's a different species. And then, of course, we have to address briefly the categories off to the side that are in italics that I treated as titles, although I don't think they are. What I think this does by juxtaposing these one next to another is the prose description that I read as a news reporter is something that cannot land precisely on an identification, an accurate description, or a name. And what's in the left-hand column is precisely that thing. To name objects on a desk, things that are right in front of you, things that are at hand and are clear as day. There's also just an interesting so I imagine that perhaps the consciousness of the poem is one who's hearing the news report while being actually oriented among the things at their desk that are familiar to their workspace. Also, though, it kind of begs you to read the description of the object alongside the newscaster paragraph. Just to give one example, the gooseneck lamp, right away we're referred to here as we're described, the full moon, but the moon is hanging motionless in the sky, so it kind of does sound like a goose light lamp, giving very little light. It could be dead, so it's something that is going out, and there's a dimness among it, right? And the visibility is poor, and that's something that we would hear again as like a meteorological forecast, or perhaps something you might hear if you're in an airplane. But I think it also is a roundabout way of describing what is being given off from this lamp that the writer is sitting among. So there seems to be also just a distance in this poem between the writer and between what the writer is hearing, and the dominant voice of the poem then being what's emanating from the radio or from the television at that time. There's a lot more that could be said about this. I'm certain of it. However, I'm also very hungry, and I'm certain of that as well. So I'm going to be on my way at this time to go and make some dinner. If anybody has anything they would like to add about the poem, I'd be really curious to hear it, because I didn't get a whole lot of time, not just with you on this video, but with the poem beforehand. So it's something that I'm going to hope to get back to later today or someday in the future. Until then, thank you again for being here and for joining us, and I wish you all peace.